Representing people in hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you once again for joining our show. I have my superstar panels, attorneys Bonita Banks and Marlon Primes today. But it's a rather sad day. There are so many things in the news. It's difficult to know where to start. But the biggest, news that affects everybody that's listening to the show is probably the government shutdown and the adverse effect it's going to have on ordinary folks in your community. I was looking at these statistics in Indianapolis, Marion County, and I discovered there is approximately 123,000 folks that need food stamps, for example, to survive. Unfortunately, they're running out of money. And so they've been featuring the air traffic controllers and people like that. And that's a good point of beginning. But they were talking about not being able to pay their mortgage. And apparently they were setting up these food lines. But then I looked at the folks here in Indianapolis. I'm thinking, we don't have that safety net here to cover all the folks that's going to be hungry. And I don't know about in your community, Attorney Banks and Primes, but that's going to have a devastating effect on what happens here locally. And I suspect that this is going to be an adverse effect all over the country. Although I noticed that the farmers are complaining and, we got a mess of a national economy, but I'm really concerned about those benefits being deprived of folks. We have a lot of hungry folks, and I don't know what the solution is.
Well, good morning, everyone. I can speak from personal experience about the shutdown. As many of you know, I was a government employee for 30 years at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And, I was there when we had the longest shutdown, which was 35 days. And I think what, people need to understand is that, many of us still had to report to work. So we had to, pay expenses in terms of driving to and from work if you were deemed essential. And then, the government is no longer making contributions to your medical insurance. So, when my daughter, my youngest, was born, and this was in the 90s when they had another shutdown, I had a jury trial during shutdown, and my wife was 9 months pregnant. And so we weren't sure if insurance benefits would lapse. It just was a whole slew of things. And so there are a lot of federal workers that are, worried about, whether or not they're going to be able to put food on the table. It takes a while to process unemployment, to get money in your pocket. And then on top of that, what you mentioned before, Attorney Lee, was a whole issue of food stamps. It's 25,000 in Indianapolis, the county surrounding Indianapolis. It's 200,000 in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland. And I know a number of our, conservative brothers and sisters will say, well, hey, the food banks and soup kitchens will handle it, but they got to cut in terms of the federal budget. And they just don't have the resources or bandwidth to sustain that. And then you put on top of that, put on top of that the cuts during the Doge, where they asked people to accept the buyout, and that buyout, the payments ended on September 30th. So that group of people are still potentially out of work and in need of resources. Then you have these furloughed, federal workers. A predominant number are African Americans. They're not getting paid. Many are required to go to work, and then there's no food on their table. So it's really a bad situation across the board.
Attorney Lee, I'm happy, and good morning, Attorney Primes and our listening audience. I'm really glad that we're having this discussion this morning regarding the federal government shutdown, and it's wreaking a devastating impact on millions of Illinois citizens and our citizens across this nation. We saw 500,000 plus African American women lost their jobs in the last 120 days. And we know that Black women, many of them were employed with the federal government. And we know that Black women can be and are the backbone of many of our households. And so it's having a devastating impact. And it's important that we share information regarding how our listening audience and others may be experiencing, share information regarding what our families are experiencing and how we can support each other. For example, federal SNAP benefits will be terminated for 1.9 million Illinois residents on November 1st. That is if the current administration and congressional Republicans do not reopen the federal government. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but SNAP is 100% federally funded. And Illinois administers $350 million to Illinois residents each month. And we know that SNAP is one of the most successful anti-hunger programs in the world. It's time tested and it protects children and families from hunger. And just quickly, 37% of SNAP households have older adults, 45% have children, and 44% of households have a person with a disability. And so to frame our discussion, what do we do if this critical benefit is terminated on November 1st? In Illinois, Governor Pritzker has stated that there's currently no alternative funding in the Illinois budget. So as Attorney Primes referenced, there will be a lot of pressure on food organizations such as, for example, the Chicago Food Depository and church and food pantries. And so what can we do? There is an initiative called 5calls.org, and I'll put the information in the chat box. We can call our members of Congress and we can tell them to get back to work. And there are other initiatives that I'm hoping that our callers will share with us on this call.
Well, that thing you just mentioned is really complicated. And the Republicans in the House, they passed a bill that was approved by the Senate. The net result, of course, is that billionaires and wealthy multimillionaires will receive substantial tax breaks and incentive. Meanwhile, the big, bad, ugly, beautiful bill, whatever it's called, it will result in an unfair distribution of wealth. But one of the offshoot of that, of course, is the subsidies by the Biden and Obama on health insurance. So I was looking at some statistics. They were showing a family of four under the Obamacare program, Biden, paying about $7,000 a year for insurance. Once the subsidy expired, it was $22,900. So that family is making combined household $80,000 a year. About 27% of their income would be for health insurance. What that means, of course, is that the typical average American worker will lose health insurance, which ergo, we have people getting sicker, we have people running their bills, we have more bankruptcies. So it's something that I think that's a complicated issue. And I support what the Democrats are doing because of the fact that I don't think that we can withstand this type of adverse effect on our national economy. I just think that every American needs health insurance. And if we don't have that, people have horrific outcome. Health insurance is so important to being able to live in our country. But Marlon, I noticed that you had a couple of questions. One of the callers want to know when you work for the federal government and they had a shutdown, if they pass some type of spending, that they do what Trump is proposing, just to give money to certain Republican cities and ignore the Democrat area.
No, they didn't do that. And in fact, what happened during all the government shutdowns that I was a part of, once the government reopened, they gave us our money back. And now there's a proposal that, hey, they're only going to pay the people that are deemed essential. So what happens in the shutdown is, let's assume, you have, a pool of federal employees. Each particular agency designates, who is going to be essential, and the essential people still have to come to work and get paid. So what typically happened is, after the shutdown was over, the people that were deemed essential were paid. They obviously had to be paid, and also the people that were furloughed through no fault of their own were paid. Now there's a proposal that, hey, we're only going to pay the individuals that actually came to work. And the challenge there is that this is through no fault of anybody. They have mortgages, they have school tuitions, and I think the government and Congress and the administration during those prior shutdowns did the right thing and making sure everybody's made whole. But in answer to your question, there's never been a situation where it was partisan, where I'm only going to pay you if you're a Republican, I'm only going to pay you if you're a Democrat. That's untenable. And the thing that, your listening audience needs to have ammunition about is that a lot of these blue states, Illinois, California, New York, those are the ones that are funding the entire federal government. In other words, they're giving more money in tax dollars than they're receiving. So to pick and choose and say, hey, I'm going to punish California or Illinois or New York, that's incongruent. It doesn't make a lot of sense because they are, providing money to really finance the whole federal government.
Yeah, Attorney Banks, one of the things I noticed that our friend Pierre, he had somewhat of, I don't know, he said, and I bet less than half of them recipient vote here and there. Well, I need to address that. It kind of bothered me because of the thought process. I guess he's saying that because the people poor and they don't vote, I mean, this is a consequence. But the truth of the matter is, here in Indianapolis, I've been tracking these statistics, and the truth of the matter, in the last election, we had 12 to 15,000 Democrat vote, and we have 470,000 registered. So it was not just poor folks, it was rich folks, it was educated folks, it was a whole potpourri of folks that didn't vote. And so although I will say that maybe there is a higher percentage, but that's not the reason. It would be great that if everybody who received government assistance voted 100% of the time, but that's never going to happen. But that would be ideal goal because their rights are not protected oftentimes because of their voter participation level. But that just means that we as Americans have to reach out to everybody and try to get everybody registered and everybody to vote. We got upcoming elections here in November in different states. Some, of course, listen to our show. And then we have the midterm next year that's going to be critical to our democracy. There are so many crazy things going on, but it all goes back to the White House now. The government shut down because they're trying to have these bills become law that is bad for the typical American. And so I understand what the fight is all about. It is a fight worth fighting for. I think that some of the things when I was reviewing the bill didn't make a lot of sense to me. I didn't, quite frankly, when I was trying to read the bill, I didn't understand it, a lot of the stuff. And the reason I say that, because I'm sure the people that voted for the freaking bill probably didn't understand certain parts of it either. They throw so many crazy things in there until it's impossible to ascertain exactly what they're talking about. What I was looking for, though, I was trying to find out the tax consequences if you have net worth of a certain amount and the tax deduction. And one of the things I thought was cute, I was just thinking about this. If you own a private jet, you got to buy a private jet, say it costs you 20 million or 25 million. You get to write it all off the first year. I thought that was hilarious. You know how many people that applied to? Less than 1/10 or 1% of people in America will go out and pay cash for a private jet, you know. And so you have things like that, these esoteric terms. The net result, though, is that you eliminate your tax liability. If you could buy a property and say you made 50 million and you buy a jet for 35 million, you could debt finance it. You get a $35 million tax write-off. Your reportable income is down to 15 million. So instead of paying 15 to 17 million tax, you pay 4 or 5 million. And so, and that's some of the math. And I was thinking about that, and I think that the Democrats probably need to have a better message on this. The bottom line is that we're fighting for survival for the typical American. Now, but the second part of that, what I didn't understand, maybe you, Vanita, Marlon, I didn't understand the federal court situation. I saw that the federal court is supposed to run out of money on October 17th, right? I didn't understand this component. Does that mean that the judges are the only one to get paid, or how does that work, Marlon, Vanita? Do you guys know?
What my understanding is, there is a projected time that, the government cannot pay its bills. And then, as you remember, in prior administrations, they said, well, hey, there are special measures that can be taken and, to make sure, the government can pay its bills. So it looks like we're in that special measure period. And that's problematic for a number of reasons because, your listening audience should know that for the first time, the federal deficit this week hit $38 trillion. And, and these shutdowns, they don't help us in terms of having other individuals, particularly foreign, investors or even, domestic investors want to invest in our economy, finance our debt. So if we become unstable, they're going to go elsewhere, and it's going to be harder for us to finance our debt, and our interest rates are going to go up. So, this shutdown doesn't really help us in that regard. So they may be able to do special measures to keep things afloat, but in the long run, it's really disastrous for all of us.
And I would say that, it's disastrous, beginning now. And because of the current shutdown, which began on October 1st. So what are we, 25 days into that? The federal judiciary's operating funds were exhausted on October 17th. And so they're now operating under a limited capacity. And there are 94 district courts and 13 appeal courts. They're now maintaining only constitutionally required functions. And so the level of service to customers is going to vary by location to location. And with respect to who's getting paid, the federal judges are constitutionally protected from having their salaries reduced, but other employees are being furloughed or they're working without pay to perform essential duties. And so, of course, there's going to be delays in civil cases and pauses in litigation due to limited resources. So the devastating effects of the shutdown are piling up each and every minute.
Terrible. Okay, Imhotep, you had a question or comment, sir?
Good morning to everyone, to all the great guests and everybody online on YouTube. I did send a few messages out. I'll just re-echo again. There's a growing chorus online from the public and spearheaded our sisters. Boy, Attorney Banks, I always tell you, that's why we have to have a duality. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And that Venus energy is coming through about boycotting. These cuts want to come through on November 1st. Boycott. People are already struggling. Gas has ticked up. It went up from $2.79 real fast to $3.25. I think I saw $3.15 or $3.11 this morning. We see what food costs. We see the insult to the cattlemen. I'm not a beef eater, really. I may have one serving a month. I don't eat much beef, but I saw the insult to the cattlemen this week. And then Donald Trump, of course, has said he wants to buy beef from Argentina. And then he told the cattlemen they need to bring their prices down. Beef is astronomical. I was in Costco or Sam's Club the other day, and I just browsed through. It had a lot of roasts and steaks, Angus, marked down, and people still wasn't buying them. So it's already tough as it is. So we need to use every tool we have against this administration. Protesting is fine. No King says it's fine, but your money. This country operates on the dollar sign. And so
one thing you just said, though, struck a nerve with me, Costco, which usually have some really good pricing. And so I don't eat a lot of steak, maybe once a month, and maybe 6-7 times a year. But every now and then I started working out and I wanted to get more protein. So I went by Costco today for the show to look at the price of steaks. Much to my chagrin, the ribeye steaks last year, 3 of the steak that cost $38 to $42, they're now between $87 to $99. It's
$99, yes.
Yeah, see, I was shocked. I'm thinking, are they freaking kidding? I mean,
it's good. But he tells the cattlemen to bring the prices down.
In terms of, it's not like it went up 3 or 5% like they say in the economy. It went up like 100% almost. 100%. The price is double.
It's double, but he insults the cattlemen who voted for him to bring the prices down, and it's just not. I want to ask you guys, and I don't know, Attorney Banks, you may have heard of it, Prime, y'all may have heard of it, but here, Rakita signed on to that brief challenging birthright citizenship, and I mean, does that true? We see the Supreme Court now is probably going to try to strike down Voting Rights Act. We see the Supreme Court now is hearing a Trump case. If people who smoke marijuana can legally own guns, I don't even know how they're going. How would they enforce that in the first place? I don't know how that would be enforced. If you smoke marijuana, can you own a gun? What about alcohol and all that? And then now we see this with this birthright citizenship. What do we have going on here? And then lastly, with as it goes back again to the cuts, we're seeing it in the healthcare sector real bad. People are getting their shifts cut. Nurses are having to split shifts, being sent home. People in all departments are being sent home. Surgeries have been way down. If anybody knows anything about healthcare, surgeries is really the bread and butter of most hospitals, most healthcare institutions. Surgeries bring in the money, ortho surgeries to be exact, and open heart surgeries to be exact. And they've been cut. I know somebody right now that needs surgery on the C3 and C4. That's around your neck, and that's been delayed for them. And so we're seeing it bad right now. And so I don't know if the general public is really aware, but they're really bad. And the last thing, they had a video come out about asking people about, do they support Obamacare or do they support the Affordable Care Act? And not to bring race in it, but it was all Caucasians. It was about 10 of them. That dude from the Midas Touch? No, it's from Now This interviewed. And all of them, except for one, that they did not like Obama and they didn't support Obamacare, but yet they supported the Affordable Care Act. And that just goes to, again, a large percentage of the population and white population don't have a clue the services that they get. They couldn't articulate why they didn't like President Obama, but yet they didn't like Obamacare, but they liked the Affordable Care Act. And so they don't even have a clue really what's going on out here, Brother Nate. They really don't have a clue. And thanks for taking my call.
Well, one of the most significant things about President Obama, we had a record number of job growth for 82 consecutive months during his tenure. That was the first time in American history. And then Biden did something that was extraordinary during his presidency. We had job growth. Now we have a negative job growth in our country, and it's getting worse because we're going to see a record number of bankruptcies. I was looking at the farming community, which went 85% according to political pundits, 85% for Trump. And the farming industry is going bankrupt because of the tariffs. And so we have there's so many news items that are relevant, but most of them goes back to the White House or part of the White House because that's under some major construction whereby they got no permits or anything to build this gigantic ballroom. And I don't want to get into that, but it just seemed like the whole thing stinks to high heaven in terms of criminality. You know, all these folks who are donating money getting special favoritism. The whole thing just is rotten. But in any event, so much for that. And hopefully, I hope and pray that we can get some type of conclusion done, because the human suffering that's caused by the shutdown, it just can't be measured in dollars and cents. So my heart goes out to all those folks who are adversely affected by this terrible situation. No fault of your own, unless you voted for this idiot in office. But it's a terrible tragedy. A next topic, we had a lot of issues to cover today. What was the next issue, Vanita?
So many issues, Attorney Lee. As we're wrapping up this topic, one of the things that's troubling to me is that it's been reported that the Pentagon has accepted an anonymous $130 million contribution to help cover military payroll during the budget impasse. And then we also see this long list of corporations that are contributing to the um, building of this ballroom. It seems to me that those things are violating so many laws, and including, there's just big conflict of interest where you can essentially advertise, a ballroom. And let's not talk about how the People's House was demolished last week, and we all had to witness that. And it was just devastating to so many of us because we know that our people built that house. And so, but back to, it's like putting, this new ballroom up. As you know, when we talk about last week, we talked about, football stadiums with our Attorney Smith. And it's like you're purchasing the naming rights, if you will, of the White House, of a White House facility. That's unconstitutional. That is illegal. We can't do that. And so the question from my perspective is, what do we do to stop these illegal actions? I think we need to be real full-throated around the fact that they don't care about birthright citizenship, to our caller's point. They don't care about the constitutional protections to privacy and to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This administration is doing exactly what it wants to do, and it's a real problem. I don't know if I answered your question, but I wanted to go back and make some final thoughts on, again, an anonymous donor contributing $130 million to fund military compensation. And we've got these corporations sitting over here that are also contributing to the purchase of this ballroom. And I agree back again with Pierre that we need to respond with our $1 trillion economic power and boycott these companies and be prepared to do it on a long-term sustainable basis. Let's remember that the Montgomery boycott lasted over a year. And so I know that our people, they were inconvenienced and burdened when they had to walk to work or obtain some other mode of transportation. But it's that kind of action that I think is going to have impact on the illegal and unconstitutional actions that we're all witnessing.
I think Attorney Banks, you're absolutely right here. There should be one standard, not multiple standards. And the problem, just to frame the issue, is that you have a series of donors that are donating millions of dollars, and these are the same individuals that are doing business with the United States, or asking for mergers to be approved, or asking, or in line for other things to help their businesses. So what about the individuals that are competing for those very same contracts? How is there, at least the impression that everyone's going to be treated the same if you have corporation A, B, and C that are, donating millions and millions of dollars? So that's point one. And then point two is that, hey, there's a series of rules, regulations, in terms of, making donations. If you're doing business in front of the government, there's a lot of conflict of interest statutes. I think we need to be full-throated in making sure that, hey, those should apply, because we all know, had any of this happened when President Obama was in office, there would be, screens all across the political spectrum. So, there has to be, one standard. And then finally, the whole issue of, hey, Attorney Banks makes a good point. This is a historic building. Let's just kind of think about this. Some of the construction is, 100 years old, and we have one person making a unilateral decision that there's going to be, renovations. We're familiar with, historic, buildings and the review process. That is just all skipped over. And that certainly is troubling because it's inconsistent with, how these matters are handled in other situations. So there should be one standard as opposed to multiple standards.
Well, a perfect example of that is that we're seeing what appeared to be widespread criminality in open and obvious. I was watching some of the political shows, and they were justifying this massive contribution. Then you see, okay, what's going on? The cryptocurrency executive, Xiaoping Zhao, who founded the Binance Crypto Exchange, was given a pardon. So this billionaire guy who then donates millions of dollars, now he had 4 billion in fines and forfeiture and 50 million in fines. And so this guy get a complete pardon after he plead guilty to the violation. So now we see the Trump administration hosted a dinner for top buyers of their meme coin cryptocurrency, and they spent $150 million buying into the Trump meme coin. Then we see what just dumbfounded me, Marlon, Anita. We see the President of the United States making a claim for what, 200 or 300 million, some outrageous sum, against the federal government for the criminal investigation into him. So apparently, I watched the news this morning, the President of the United States is making a claim against the United States for criminal prosecution against him. I've never seen such level of criminality just front and center. It's just like it's becoming normal now. Everybody's saying, okay, this is okay. I don't understand how we've fallen so low in America. Yes, what was your question? I've never seen such levels of...
Hello?
Hello, who's speaking?
Yeah, hi, this is Renee Schulk from New York City. How are you today?
Great, you got a lot of things going on. New York, I see that, was it Mandami?
Yeah, Zoran Mandami. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Very hot.
Yeah, it's hot. Yeah, it's hot. But I wanted to first talk to you guys to touch on what you said about, about the boycotting. I think that is absolutely right. Unfortunately, thousands of people are going to get laid off from Target. Right. But at least that kept Target from contributing to the ballroom. So they're not able to be part of that whole scam. And I think, we should, I think he should just tear down the whole damn White House. That's how I feel about it. And the reason why I say that is because that was built with our enslaved ancestors' blood. So I don't care. That is the least on my list of pile of dump that he has put on us. So he do what he wants with that. And then, we'll just rebuild it. They'll rebuild it later. And then the shutdown is hurting everyone. It's not just hurting people on SNAP. It's not just hurting the people that did vote or didn't vote or non-voters or whatever the case. It's hurting everyone because, as Pierre said, the SNAP money is a big portion of the funding that comes in for some of these grocery stores, these farmers markets, and et cetera. And if they no longer have SNAP money, then I think they're going to have to raise their prices, and there'll be fewer people to service them and products in the market. And then, of course, healthcare as well, because I think healthcare is going to skyrocket. And, of course, we know rural hospitals are closing as they should. So that's what I have to say on the topics that you said earlier. Now, if you want to talk about New York City, then let me know what you think you want to know from me.
Well, I see that I don't understand why they're saying that he's the worst candidate ever. And I listened to the speech, man, he really, when I watched the debate, part of it, he really embarrassed the former governor, I thought.
Renee,
Yeah,
as you're answering that question, could you include in your response, why does he need to add the word socialist behind Democrat? Thank you.
Well, I don't know his personal reason for adding socialist, because I think he was labeled that, so he just ran with it. He was like, it's not a bet. It's like, the Black community embracing the N word. It's so to make people think that doesn't shame me. That doesn't make me feel bad that you can call me that, because I'm better than that and I know who I am. And so it sort of takes the sting out of when other people were calling him socialist. That would be my assessment. But since I don't work on his campaign, I can't tell you. But what I will say, though, that socialist is not a bad word. It's just not. Everything that, Elon Musk is reaping the benefits of socialism because they bailed him out of, and the government is giving him money to do the projects that he's doing. So I think, me personally, this is what I think, that Zohran Mamdani is taking the sting out of using the word socialism, because that's what the right always wants to use when they want to tear down the things that all Americans want. It's not just Democrats want it. It's not just liberals want it. It's all Americans want these things for our country. So that's my personal view, and then I'll go on about the race. So I'm taking my triplets today with me, as I always do, to vote. And we will be voting, because early voting has started today in New York City. And so I will be taking them after, later this afternoon. And I'm excited about it. They're always excited about it. I cannot think of a better candidate that we could have running for this position. And I don't care what the national news is saying. I don't care what people are saying online. They don't know New Yorkers. They don't know what we actually think about what's going on here. And I'm 61, so I'm not one of those, well, it's just young voters. And I'm not saying I'm actually ancient, but I'm not young like what they're thinking. It's not just young voters, and I'm Black too. So it's not just young white voters or young this voter. It's everybody across the spectrum is looking at this as like, sort of not quite like, sort of like when Obama ran, that there's some hope that we can latch on to. We don't have to accept the same things that Cuomo and the DNC status quo want for us. We can actually dream higher and bigger. And maybe we won't get there, but at least somebody is willing to try. And that's all we want, is just for somebody to actually want to try and not tell us that we have to remain in the same place and the best we can get is this. He's amazing for that. So that's my opinion.
Well, the thing that I thought was significant is that he said rental prices in New York City is too high, so we need rent subsidies. Now, they're being criticized, Republicans, but then when I look across the country, they were saying 85% of the farmers voted for Trump. Well, the farmers are looking for what? Subsidies. They want money from the federal government in order to forego bankruptcy or loss of their property, loss of their crops. So without a bailout, they were predicting, one guy said all the farmers, but at a minimum is going to wipe out over half of the farming operation in America, right? Unless they get this massive socialist bailout.
Correct.
And so when we had the pandemic, the government paid out, a couple $1 trillion, and who was a bigger recipient? Well, law firms was right at the top of the list. A form of socialism, to bail out these wealthy entities, and all these businesses receive billions of dollars. Socialism. So what they're saying is a negative is something that we're doing if you're taking part of what socialism means, which is that you take government benefits to enable the masses to receive part of those proceeds. But we're doing it on a narrow basis. We're trying to pick and choose which component of our community receive those benefits. And so that's what I have a point of departure on, is that we in one hand, we're saying that this is a good idea. On the other hand, we're saying this is the worst thing ever. Well, it's the worst thing ever if somebody else gets it and you don't get more than they get, it seems like to me, is what they're saying.
I agree with you. I think what the thing is that who defines what socialism is? It means one thing for one group of people, and it means something else for another group of people. And I think what Zohran Madani is trying to say is socialism is not a bad thing, no matter who is benefiting from it. You're correct. The farmers get socialism. Your fire department is a socialist kind of, funding. I mean, because everybody pays for it, even if you don't use it. And so I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to make socialism as not a negative thing. The same thing as with SNAP or welfare or whatever. It's usually associated with single black women. Majority of people who are on welfare on SNAP are white folks, and many of them in the states that voted for Trump, so as you all know. So once we start dealing with the language and the connotations that come with the language that we use on mass media and in social media, and we address it head on and show the true picture, I think that people are smarter and wiser, and they don't get tricked into voting for a word or for an idea of a word. And I think that's what why Zohran is really masterful at being a candidate and making sure that people come aboard with him. And as Attorney Banks said, he actually, when he had his debate, he really got on Cuomo about, the fact that Cuomo himself is one of those DNC people who have a lot of baggage to carry, and we don't have to stand for it. And I'm going to let you take some other calls, and I really appreciate you talking to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Going forward, Attorney Banks and Prime, we had this spectacle in Virginia where we have a former insurance lawyer who had never worked at the Justice Department became head of that Virginia, appointed by a process that I've never seen occur before. But the net result is that you get indictment of Comey and then indictment of the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. Did you watch that spectacle this week?
Yes, as a DOJ alumni, it's just very disappointing. Obviously, DOJ historically has not been perfect, but there have been standard norms. To have a president of the United States, he was intending a message to be private for Attorney General Pam Bondi's eyes only, and it basically says, hey, indict these people and then reach the conclusion they are guilty as H. And that is just very, very unusual. And then after that happens, these same individuals get indicted. And we have to frame the issue as well in the sense that you have a Republican appointed U.S. attorney who looked at the facts of the case and said that, hey, they're not meritorious. And then this person gets fired. And then you bring in someone who has never been a prosecutor. And the other thing that's very telling is that these indictments where someone goes to the grand jury and gets an indictment, those are typically done by assistant U.S. attorneys. To have the U.S. attorney go in there kind of signals what many people have speculated, that no one else would go in there because they didn't think that things were reliable that were being said. So it's really problematic. And the final piece that I'll add, that's kind of really, what you would call irony. There's been so much pushback in this administration about, unqualified African Americans and DEI. If you look at that indictment, and I encourage people to look at it, it's filled with typos. There's a lot of procedural irregularities. There's two different types of indictments that were issued, and the audience should understand. This is why we need affirmative action, because there's a tendency to hire people that think and look just like you. And all affirmative action is to spread, your pool of potential candidates. And this is just exhibit A, B, and C. Why we really need that, because it's somebody that's clearly unqualified.
It's my understanding as well, and there's two briefs that have been filed to dismiss the Comey case. One based on the selective, malicious prosecution. And if this is not a model example of a case that should be dismissed based on the selective and malicious prosecution, I don't know. And I'm sure you would agree, Attorney Primes, that this is the case. And also, it's my understanding that the attorney, who is an insurance attorney, who's never served in a prosecutor capacity at all, that the case should be dismissed. One of the motions is to dismiss the case because she was unlawfully appointed, and it has to do with, I believe, Department of Justice procedures. First, I think I don't think there are, regulations, and it starts with the Constitution of enabling the president to appoint the Attorney General of the United States with the advice and consent of the Senate. And then there's also a specific process for when the vacancies occur. And it's my understanding that the prosecutor who advised that there was no basis for proceeding forward with the case against Comey, that he was fired, right? And then this second prosecutor was appointed. It's my understanding that that in a situation like this, and we're talking about a time frame of 120 days, that all of her actions can be thrown out because the president cannot appoint someone in this position every 120 days. So it sounds like maybe it's procedurally convoluted what I am referencing right now, but I think based on my reading of the motion to dismiss, that it is as equally a sound basis to dismiss the case against Comey.
Well, when I looked at that pleading, I echo what Marlon said. It was a bunch of junk, right? The person obviously who wrote that did not have the requisite skill to write an indictment, and the indictment itself was a comedy of errors. One group of documents showed no indictment, the other one showed a split verdict on indictment, and that was kind of bizarre to me. I've never seen that before. But the problem that I see is that it's the protection. They want these positions to be affirmed by the Senate. And because you don't get the Senate confirmation, then there's a limited power from the executive branch. Then ultimately, the way I understand it, it goes to the federal district court judges to put someone in that position after a certain period of time.
Exactly.
So what they've done, because they could not get Senate confirmation of this new person, particularly on a short notice, because the statute of limitation, depending on who you talk to, would have run against Coleman back in September. So they were trying to usurp the process to get someone in place. So you just made up a set of rules. You got somebody who has no experience. They filed documents. They secured an indictment. So it'd be interesting to see what evidence was presented to the grand jury. Now, I recognize the fact that maybe they don't present exculpatory evidence. Like, for example, the prior prosecutor determined there was no cause for an indictment. So I suspect that when they get the grand jury transcript, that at no point did they share that information with the grand jury. And so I also suspect that this be part of a successful litigation effort on the Coleman part to get the matter thrown out. Because I think that when they said that this was this targeted prosecution, you see the same thing happen to Letitia James. Why? Because she was doing her job, enforcing the laws of New York. And I'm no fan of James Comey, but I do love Letitia James. I think that she's been an outstanding AG.
We have a caller.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Caller.
Hello, it's Pierre.
Hey, Pierre, how are you doing today, sir?
Oh, all right. Quick to the point. Speaking of grand juries, I think I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the James indictment, they actually did not go for a grand jury in the area or that part of Virginia where the mortgage fraud allegedly occurred. I think that's in Norfolk or somewhere. They actually moved it up to Alexandria, and I don't know how what difference that make, but it seemed like it was a point that needed to be brought up. So they actually got an indictment from another grand jury in another locale or part of the state. But no, early on we talked about we're going through this because of poor people don't vote. I made that point. They don't vote, in my opinion, and I think that's why we're here. And you said a lot of people don't vote. Well, that's the problem. But it's especially a problem with folk who get benefits and everything. And I know people that get them and they don't vote. But Marlon,
wait a second, Pierre. Let me point out something to you. There was like 470,000 registered Democrats in Marion County in the last election. I think about 215, 220,000 voted. So about 60 or 55% of the registered Democrat would include wealthy folks, white, black, other races that didn't vote. And that's a problem that we have to fix in order to be a successful political party in the state. We don't have sufficient voter turnout here in Indianapolis. And
I think it.
Go ahead.
I think it should be mandatory. I think it should be, if you get benefits, you should vote. Now, I don't care who you vote for, but if you get benefits, you should vote. But real quick, I wanted to ask Primes a question, Attorney Primes. Will the Supreme Court address that part of the Voting Rights Act where individuals and civil rights organizations can bring election fraud charges or whatever civilly against the government. Will they address that in this case? Because, as you know, I filed a case that went to the Seventh Circuit, never got any reporting on it, but that was an elections fraud case. And they said I didn't have standing, even though I was a candidate who was complaining about the way the totals were being reported by the Marion County Election Board. So will they address that? And thank you for taking my call, Nate.
Thanks for calling,
Well,
sir.
well, hey, good morning, and it's always good to hear from you. No, the Supreme Court in this decision is looking at the constitutionality of Section 2. And so that's what they're going to basically look at. And the question is whether or not the remedy, and Section 2 is a remedy provision, whether or not they can draw majority minority districts. So many of us are concerned that the Supreme Court may say that cannot be done, and as a consequence, you could see half the members of the Congressional Black Caucus no longer in Congress. So it is really a clear and present danger to our community. Now, there's another issue as it relates to standing, and there is a move afoot to make sure the only people that would have standing would be the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. So that's troubling because, right now that the Civil Rights Division, isn't doing its traditional role, because their traditional role is they were the individuals that were there, to help integrate, some of our schools in the South. And now, they're focusing on, alleged reverse racism in sanctuary cities.
Sure. Unfortunately, Pierre and everyone, we're out of time for this week. I appreciate the callers, and I really appreciate the participation of all of our guests and all the people that listen to us in all the states. Special shout out for the people down there in South Florida. I appreciate you sending me emails and texts. And I'd like to thank our VIP guests, Attorney Banks and Prime. So take care, everyone. We'll talk to you next Saturday.
Thanks so much.